Welcome to another episode of Healthcare Reframed, created by Joshua Gotthard and curated by Gotthard Medical Group. Be informed.
All right, welcome back everyone for another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're going to be talking about something that I think a lot of people have experienced in their own lives, maybe without even realizing that there's a whole system being built to try to address it, and that's the challenge of getting healthcare data to move between different systems.
Oh, for sure, yeah. It's something that impacts really every single one of us.
Yeah, so we're talking about TEFCA today. And just as a reminder for people who might be new to this, that stands for the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement.
It's a mouthful.
It really is. And alongside TEFCA, we're also going to talk about this technology called FHIR, which is Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources.
And FHIR is like the up-and-coming star of all of this.
Yeah, and things are really moving fast in this space. There are all these new rules, new technologies, and honestly, it can be a lot to keep up with.
That's why we're here, right?
That's why we're here.
Exactly. So we're going to try to break down all of these developments, what they mean for the future of healthcare, and most importantly, what they mean for you.
Great.
So let's start with the basics. Why does this even matter? Why should we care about healthcare data exchange?
So, you know how frustrating it is when you go to a new doctor and they have to request your records from your previous provider and you have to wait and maybe fill out the same forms again?
Oh, yeah, been there.
Right. It's like the systems just don't talk to each other.
Like pulling teeth.
Exactly. And that's a huge problem. Not just annoying, but a real problem because it impacts the quality of care you receive.
Absolutely. Like if your doctor doesn't have your complete medical history, they might miss something important, right?
Right. They might order unnecessary tests or prescribe medications that interact with something you're already taking.
Right, right.
It can lead to misdiagnoses, delays in treatment.
And honestly, it can even be life-threatening in some cases. Exactly. So that's the heart of the issue TEFCA is trying to address. It's really about making sure that everyone involved in your care has access to the information they need when they need it.
So TEFCA is kind of like the big picture solution, and we've got all this information about the how of that. So how does it actually work?
Well, TEFCA itself isn't a piece of technology. It's more like a set of rules.
Okay. Rules of the road.
Yeah, exactly. It was created as a result of the 21st Century Cures Act.
Oh, right. I remember hearing about that.
And the goal is to create this, we keep hearing network of networks for health information exchange.
So instead of every healthcare provider having to build individual connections with every other provider.
Right, which would be a nightmare.
Yeah, a logistical nightmare.
They can connect to this network and be able to share information securely with anyone else on the network.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, so it's about creating a more standardized, streamlined approach to data exchange.
Okay, so we have the rules of the road. So then where does FHIR fit into all of this? How does it play a role in making this network function?
FHIR is like the language, the common language.
The lingua franca.
Exactly. The lingua franca of this network. It's a modern standard for data exchange that's, gaining a lot of traction right now.
Much more modern than fax machines.
Oh, yeah. Way more advanced than faxing medical records back and forth.
Which still happens.
Which unfortunately still happens. But, FHIR is API-based, which is really important.
APIs, that's application programming interfaces, right?
Yeah, exactly.
For people who might not be familiar with all the technical jargon.
Yeah, so APIs basically allow systems to communicate with each other in a more flexible and real-time way.
Okay, so instead of just sending these big clunky files back and forth,
right,
they can actually query specific data points.
Right, so if a doctor just needs to know your allergies,
they don't need your entire life story.
Exactly. They can use FHIR to just pull that specific piece of information.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and it sounds like a huge improvement over the way things are typically done now. But I'm guessing, even with a common language and these APIs, integrating FHIR into this vast network of healthcare providers is still a pretty daunting task.
It's hugely complex.
Yeah.
And TEFCA recognizes that, which is why they've laid out a roadmap for integrating FHIR in stages.
Okay, so let's talk about these stages. What's happening in the first stage?
So stage one is all about FHIR content support, meaning systems can technically exchange FHIR data.
Okay, that's a good start.
Right, but there's a catch.
Always a catch.
Right. Systems aren't totally aligned on how they structure and interpret that data yet.
So it's kind of like they're speaking the same language but with different accents?
Yeah, exactly. Like they might be using slightly different dialects.
So it's not quite seamless communication yet.
Not quite, but it's a step in the right direction.
Right, that makes sense. So what about stage two? How do we get from these different dialects to a more universal understanding?
So stage 2 is all about QHIN facilitated FHIR exchange.
Okay, more acronyms. What's a QHIN?
QHIN stands for Qualified Health Information Network.
All right, and what do they do?
They're basically the trusted intermediaries in this network.
Okay, like the referees making sure everyone's playing by the rule.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be providing tools and services to make FHIR exchange smoother for everyone.
So they're kind of like air traffic controllers for health data,
I like that analogy.
making sure everything gets to the right place at the right time.
Exactly, and ensuring that even if systems have slightly different interpretations of the data, the information can still be understood.
Okay, so we have the rules, we have the language, and now we have the air traffic controllers.
Right.
It's starting to sound like a well-oiled machine.
Well, we're getting there, but there's still a few more stages to go.
Okay, so what's next on the roadmap?
Stage 3 is where the QHINs themselves start talking FHIR to each other.
Oh, interesting.
So instead of each individual system having to connect with every other system, right, they can all connect through these QHIN hubs.
Which seems much more efficient.
Much more efficient, and it really starts to ramp things up in terms of interoperability.
Okay, so what's the end game here? Where does all of this lead?
The ultimate goal is stage 4, end-to-end FHIR exchange. This is where we have seamless, secure FHIR data exchange between any authorized healthcare provider within the network.
Wow, that sounds amazing. No more fax machines, no more waiting weeks for medical records, just instant access to the information you need when you need it.
That's the dream.
It sounds almost too good to be true.
Well, it's definitely a complex undertaking, and there are a lot of challenges ahead.
Okay, so let's talk about those challenges.
Right.
What are some of the hurdles we need to overcome before we reach this FHIR utopia?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is security and privacy.
Of course, that's a big one.
Right. When you're talking about sensitive health information, you have to make sure that the data is protected every step of the way.
Absolutely. So it's not just about connecting these systems, it's about making sure those connections are secure and trustworthy.
Right. And that's a huge challenge.
So we have the what and the how of TEFCA and FHIR, but before we dive into those challenges, let's take a moment to step back and look at the why.
Okay.
Why should our listener care about all of this? What's the potential impact on their lives?
I mean, think about it this way. What if your doctor had instant access to your complete medical history, no matter where you've been treated? They would be able to see every diagnosis, every medication, every allergy, every test result, the whole picture. That could have a huge impact on your care.
Yeah, that would be incredible. No more trying to remember what medications you took 5 years ago or digging through dusty files to find old test results. Everything right there at your doctor's fingertips. What kind of impact would that have on patient care?
I mean, it could be revolutionary, right?
Yeah.
Think about it. More accurate diagnoses, more personalized treatment plans, fewer medical errors, right?
Fewer medical errors.
And it could even streamline things like medication refills, referrals, making the whole healthcare experience just much smoother and efficient.
Yeah, more efficient.
Yeah, and I think it also really empowers patients.
Yeah, empowers patients. How so?
Well, with easier access to their own information, patients can be more informed and make better decisions about their health.
Right, more informed decisions.
They can ask better questions, understand their options more fully, and really advocate for their own health needs, which is so important.
Advocate for their own health needs.
Absolutely. And it's not just about, doctors having more information. It's about that shift in, like, the power dynamic in healthcare.
Right, giving patients more agency.
Exactly. More agency.
Okay, so we've talked about the benefits for individual patients, but what about the bigger picture? Like, how could TEFCA and FHIR impact things like research or public health?
Oh, that's a great point. I mean, the potential there is huge. Like, imagine with de-identified data from millions of patients, researchers could really unlock new insights into diseases, identify trends, and develop new treatments much faster than we can now.
That's incredible. So it's like having this massive database of health information that can be used to advance medical knowledge and improve healthcare for everyone.
Exactly. It's really powerful stuff. For example, let's say researchers are studying a rare disease. In the past, they might have struggled to find enough patients to conduct a meaningful study. But with TEFCA and FHIR, they could potentially access data from patients across the entire country, significantly expanding their sample size and really speeding up the pace of discovery.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. And what about, things like tracking the spread of infectious diseases or identifying potential public health risks? Could TEFCA and FHIR play a role there as well?
Absolutely. Imagine being able to track the real-time spread of a new virus. Identify hotspots, target interventions more effectively, or being able to quickly identify patients who might be at risk for certain conditions based on their medical history or genetic factors.
Yeah, it really does feel like the possibilities are endless. But, obviously this is all still in the early stages. And you mentioned earlier that there are some pretty significant challenges to overcome.
Oh, for sure.
So let's dive into those a bit. What are some of the biggest hurdles we need to address before we can really realize the full potential of TEFCA and FHIR?
Well, security and privacy are probably at the top of the list.
Of course.
Right. You're dealing with sensitive health information, so you absolutely have to make sure that data is protected at every single step.
So it's not just about connecting the systems,
No,
it's
no.
about making sure those connections are secure and trustworthy.
Exactly. And that's no easy feat.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. What are some of the specific concerns around data security that you've come across?
Well, I mean, there's always the risk of data breaches,
Right.
especially as more and more information is being shared across different systems, right? And cyber attacks are becoming so sophisticated, so we have to make absolutely sure that TEFCA and FHIR are built with really robust security measures in place.
Okay. Yeah, that's a critical point. And beyond breaches, what about things like data misuse or unauthorized access? How do you prevent someone from inappropriately accessing or using this information?
Right, that's where strong privacy protocols and strict access controls come in. TEFCA has, includes guidelines for data governance and patient consent.
Right. So it's not just about the technology, it's about establishing clear rules and safeguards to
Absolutely.
ensure that data is handled responsibly and ethically.
Yeah, it's crucial. But even with those guidelines in place, getting everyone to agree on these rules and play by the same standards is a huge challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, we're talking about a massive network of different players here.
Huge.
Hospitals, healthcare systems, insurance companies, tech companies, government agencies.
There's a lot of different stakeholders.
It really is, yeah.
And getting everyone on board, making sure they're all adhering to these guidelines, requires strong leadership, collaboration, ongoing oversight.
Right. And it sounds like there's this, potential tension between wanting to share data for the greater good
For the greater good,
and the need to protect individual privacy.
it's a tough balance to strike, for
Yeah.
sure.
Right. So how do we find that balance? How do we ensure that, we're maximizing the benefits of data sharing without compromising patient privacy?
That's the million-dollar question,
Yeah.
and there's no easy answer. It's going to require ongoing dialogue, transparency, a willingness to adapt as new challenges and opportunities emerge, right? It's a constantly evolving landscape.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential benefits of TEFCA and FHIR, the challenges and the ethical considerations.
Right.
But I'm curious, stepping back a little bit, what does all of this mean for the future of healthcare? Where do you see this going in, say, 5 or 10 years?
Well, I think we're at this really exciting point. We're at the cusp of a major transformation in healthcare. And I truly believe that TEFCA and FHIR have the potential to unlock a future where healthcare is much more patient-centered, much more data-driven, and ultimately more effective.
That's a really exciting vision. But I'm guessing there are still a lot of big questions that we need to be asking as this all unfolds.
Oh, absolutely.
So what are some things that our listeners should be thinking about as they follow this journey? What are some of the key questions that we need to keep in mind?
Well, one of the most important questions, I think, is this. Will TEFCA and FHIR truly empower patients?
That's a great question. And I think we've talked about, the potential for patient empowerment, but how do we make sure that that actually happens? What needs to happen for patients to really feel empowered by this new system?
Right. It's about more than just making data accessible.
Right.
It's about ensuring that patients understand their data, they feel comfortable sharing it, and that they have the tools and the resources to really use it effectively. And, it's also about making sure that healthcare providers are embracing this shift toward patient-centered care and using the data to improve communication, to build trust, and really to empower patients to be active participants in their own health journey.
That makes a lot of sense. But what about, I hate to be a downer, but what about the potential downsides? Are there any risks or concerns that we should be aware of as this technology continues to evolve?
One concern I have is the potential for bias in algorithms.
Bias in algorithms, how so?
Well, if the data used to train those algorithms isn't representative of the whole population,
Right.
It could end up perpetuating existing healthcare disparities.
Yeah, that's a really crucial point. I mean, we need to be very mindful of those potential unintended consequences and really work to ensure that these technologies are developed and implemented in a way that benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Exactly.
So are there any other, kind of red flags or things that we should be keeping an eye on as this all unfolds?
Another area to watch closely is data ownership and control.
Right. Yeah, that's a big one.
I mean, as more and more health data is generated and shared, it raises all sorts of questions about, who owns this data, who has access to it, and how can it be used?
Yeah, and we hear a lot these days about, big tech companies collecting our data and potentially, monetizing it in ways that we're not really aware of.
Right.
Is there a risk of something similar happening in the healthcare space?
It's definitely a valid concern. We need to have, really clear guidelines and regulations in place to ensure that patient data is used responsibly and ethically.
Yeah, transparency is key.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Patients should be informed about how their data is being used, and they should have a say in how it's shared.
Okay, so it really sounds like we're trying to strike this balance.
It's all about balance.
Right, between the benefits of data sharing
The benefit.
and protecting individual rights and privacy.
Exactly.
And it feels like we're really just at the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah, we're still in the early stages for sure.
So where do we go from here? What can our listeners do if they want to stay informed and maybe even get involved in shaping this evolving landscape?
Well, first and foremost, I would say be curious.
Be curious.
Okay. Ask questions. Talk to your healthcare providers.
Talk to your doctor.
Yeah, about how they're using your data, what steps they're taking to protect your privacy.
Good advice.
And, explore the resources that are available online. The Office of the National Coordinator for Health Information Technology,
ONC.
the ONC, they've got a ton of great information on their website about TEFCA and FHIR.
Okay, so that's a good resource for people.
Yeah, definitely. And don't be afraid to advocate for yourself.
Advocate for yourself. How so?
If you believe in the power of data sharing and interoperability, make your voice heard.
Let people know.
Exactly. Support policies that promote these advancements and hold healthcare providers accountable for actually, making this vision a reality.
So it's really about being an active participant
Active participant, yes.
in shaping the future of healthcare, not just a passive recipient of whatever system gets built.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe one day we'll look back on this time as like the turning point when healthcare truly transformed into this, patient-centered, data-driven ecosystem that really benefits everyone.
It's a journey worth taking, that's for sure. And I think, thanks to conversations like this,
Deep dives.
deep dives like this, we can all stay informed and engaged in these really important conversations. So thanks for joining us today, and be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the always changing world of healthcare and technology.